The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Thursday, September 27th, Friday, September 28th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, broadcasting to you live from the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, right here at SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network at Deep Talk Radio, and we say hello to each and every one of you. If you want to take a listen to our archives, they are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, you have one day to get your butts up here for the first annual Caribou Paracon presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. It gets going in just 24 hours. Less than that. 17 hours. Less than that. Let's try 12. There we go. I'm happy with 12. Tonight's show is brought to you by the YouTube channel Ensuho. Sebastian Martin brings high-quality messages to the masses. Go to spacedoutradio.com, click on the Ensuho banner, and subscribe to your channel today. There's a lot of controversy surrounding NASA's Apollo missions. There are those who believe that there was not a single astronaut to step on the lunar surface. There are those out there who believe that NASA was told never to send people to the moon again by extraterrestrials. And then we get to the subject tonight with our guest Olav Phillips, as there are those out there who believe that the Apollo missions went past 17 and NASA hid missions 18, 19, and 20 from the public. On the 20th mission, that's where they met the Mona Lisa. We'll get into that with Olav tonight. Olav Phillips is the editor of Paranoia Magazine and is one of the leading researchers into black projects and the secret space program. Olav has appeared in numerous conferences, speaking events around the United States, and has written a plethora of articles on this subject. Then at the bottom of hour number 3, we got Everett Themer coming back for the latest edition of The Encounter from our SOR newsroom. Mr. Olav Phillips, it is always a pleasure to have you on Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, and it's an honor to be on. I love coming on Spaced Out.
Oh, we love you coming on. You know what I love. You know what I love about you coming on, my friend, and we'll make this a little bit of a love in here. Is you deal with the stuff that just makes. I'm not a sci-fi guy, but I feel like I can geek out when you're on. I really do.
Right on.
No, I appreciate that. It kind of gets me going. Me going.
I like the weird stuff, the arcane stuff, you know. I don't know. I've always, you know, I'll tell you, as a person, I've always tried to live the life, you know, less led. You know, I try to take the other path that's the one that's off the beaten path. You know, on weekends I go find old decommissioned top secret sites, and you know, I go chasing UFOs and whatever. So I try to get out there and find weird stuff. I've been to weird places. I've seen weird things. I don't know. It's an obsession.
How did you get into this?
The truth?
Yeah.
When I was about 8 years old, back in 83, 7 or 8, so in 82, 83, I was laying in bed, and I think I was reading a Choose Your Own Adventure. And I was laying there in bed, and there was this big white light that appeared in front of my window, in a second floor window. And I got scared, and I tried to hide. I tried to pretend it wasn't there, and I tried to do everything, and it wouldn't go away. So I ran across the hall, which in my case was about 4 feet, to my parents' room. I dragged my dad out of bed. I said, "You were in the Air Force. You know about airplanes. Grandpa was in the Air Force. You grew up on air bases. You know how this stuff works." He goes, yes. "You were in the Air Force. You get this." "Yes." "Okay, well, there's something weird outside of my window. I want you to tell me what it is." I drag him in there, and it's gone. And to this day, you know, I asked him about a year ago. I said, "Do you still believe me?" He goes, "Oh, yes, I believed you." That, you know. Anyway, so the next day I wake up. I go to school. I ride my bike to school. And I'm in elementary school, and, you know, like 3rd grade, 4th grade, something. And we had library day. It was on a Thursday, so Friday was library day. We go into the library, and I asked the librarian, because, you know, it's part educational, part, you know, reading. And so, you know, they're always hot to teach you the Dewey Decimal System. And so I asked her, I said, because, you know, when you're a little kid and you go to the library, the librarian is more than just a strict librarian, that they're more like your guide to knowledge, right? And so you ask them for advice, right? And so I go in there and I said, "I saw something weird outside my window." I'm on the 2nd floor. I saw something weird outside my window, and I want to know what it was. And she goes, "Oh, okay, well, you want, you know, Dewey Decimal System 127.85 to 127.92. Go find that, and you'll get your answer." I said, "Okay, great." So I walk over there, and it's airplane books. And I said, "Nope, that's not it. This was not an airplane. You know, I grew up on Air Force bases. This was not an airplane. I guarantee it." I said, "It was something else. It was something that I don't understand." And she goes, "Oh," long pause, "Oh, you want those books?" And I said, "Whatever those books are, point me to them." And so instead of giving me the Dewey Decimal number, she pointed. She said, "That bookshelf on the bottom in the corner." Okay, I walk over there. It was J. Allen Hynek's book on UFOs and Blue Book and all that. It was a book by Vallée. I think it was Messengers of Deception, though I could be wrong. I was little. And then it was Brad Steiger's Mysteries of Time and Space. And so I got all three. Like, this is it. I'm going to get my answer. I couldn't read Hynek. It was too dense. I couldn't read Vallée. It was too confusing, because Vallée gets into a lot of philosophical stuff, and my brain could not handle it. And so I read Mysteries of Time and Space by Brad Steiger, and it blew my mind, because, Mysteries of Time and Space, there's like time slips and vortexes and UFOs, all kinds of weird stuff in that book, and I couldn't put it down. And I read the whole thing, and I did not find the answer for what I had seen. I, to this day, have not found the answer at 43, but it opened my mind to a lot of possibilities. And I told Brad that before he passed away. I told him, I said, because we used to email sometimes, and I said, your book is the first book I ever read on this stuff. And, he was really touched by that, but it's the truth. And it expanded my mind so much that I needed to figure out what all these things were. And then it was no longer just UFOs. It was vortexes and time slips and, all kinds of things. So that's how I got into it.
So you fell down the rabbit hole pretty hard.
I fell down it real hard. Oh, yeah.
Do you regret
Big
it?
time. No. I mean, it changes your perception of not reality. Reality is what it is. Reality is reality, but it changes your perception of how the world works.
For a lot of people who haven't had that experience, Olaf, can you explain what you mean about how it changes the reality of how the world works?
Well, Ralph Epperson, I think, summed it up very well in The Unseen Hand, which is a very famous conspiracy book. And he said there are two ways to look at history. He said there's a normal view of history, which is what you learn at school. And he said that there's the conspiratorial view of history. And I think that once you can rationalize the idea that there are vortexes and time slips and UFOs and secret projects and aliens and chupacabras and, and Bigfoot and all this other stuff, you start to see that the world doesn't quite function the way that you thought it did. And you don't ever see the people behind the wizard behind the curtain. Only a very few people see that. And I've known people who have, and it changes them. But what you do see is you see the machinations of the system. That you see, you look at a Starbucks logo and you realize, well, that's Columbia. That's the goddess Columbia. Well, why did they put that on a Starbucks logo, right? You start to ask more questions and become more inquisitive. And I think you approach everything from a point of view of, it's what you see is what you see. But the reason why you see it may not be the reason you thought. And that gets in the whole concept of synchronicities and also, when you see a football game, am I really watching the natural outcome of the game, or am I watching something that's, that was engineered? That's probably a good way to put it.
Very intriguing indeed. And what led you to the secret space program, Black Projects? Because you have made quite a name for yourself as being one of the premier researchers in North America on this subject.
Well, I love planes. I don't like to fly, but I love airplanes, and I've always loved airplanes. And one day I realized that there were more airplanes than what we knew about. And I was looking at these photos, and it started to dawn on me. I had read an article about the CIA using UFO sightings to cover up the A-12 program. And I thought to myself, well, they're probably using UFO sightings to cover up a whole mess of stuff. And then I started to try to put the pieces together and really, dive hard into that. And to tell you how much of an airplane nut I am, I think I was in middle school when it happened. Maybe I was in high school. That the Air and Space Technology Weekly, which is well known to be a mechanism for releasing information about exotic aircraft, a conduit, they had scored the photos of the inside of the cockpit of a MiG-29. And it was the first time that anybody had ever seen the cockpit of a MiG-29. And I had read stories where the CIA was actually like buying up the magazine as fast as they could because they had pictures of the inside of the fighter plane. Well, that was me in like middle school, 7th, 8th grade, maybe 9th grade. I'm getting all excited because I get to see the cockpit of a MiG-29. So that kind of probably sums it up. And once you do that, then you start to look at other stuff. Satellites, various types of transmissions. You get into like number stations and that how they use technology for espionage, and you kind of fall down a deeper rabbit hole. So I fell down that. Number stations are awesome. I love them.
Well, knowing that the MiG-29 on the inside isn't that impressive, looking more like a 1950s fighter than a, at that point, a late 1980s or what we call a third generation fighter.
Yeah, it's all hydraulic. There's no fly-by-wire.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It is very weird.
Well, it's Soviet military doctrine that they designed, and I've actually talked to people who were in the Russian army about this kind of stuff, the Soviet army, and they intentionally designed stuff to be fairly simplistic. That a MiG-29, huge chunks of it could be fixed with tractor parts, which comes out of being invaded so many times. So they intentionally kept some of that stuff simple. I mean, they did have more sophisticated technology, but even to this day, the Bear bomber, the thing that as a Canadian flies along your coast and as an American flies along mine, you guys scramble CF-18s to go chase it away. We scramble F-22s from Elmendorf. It's effectively a turboprop. It's not a jet at all. The B-52 is, but the Bear bomber is not. It's a counter.
Did we just lose you on Skype there? Wonder where Olaf went.
You hear me?
Oh, now we got you, man. Now we got you. You went dead there for about 10 seconds or so.
Hell of a plane, though.
Yes.
Bear bomber.
Yes. I got to be up close and personal back in 1991 with a couple Su-27 flankers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I'll tell you, those pilots are crazy. They are absolutely crazy. And the Russians, they want their pilots to be crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, you want to see some really crazy stuff? The French Air Force, their pilots actually make like music videos and stuff. And they're flying these Typhoons and Mirages, mostly Typhoons and Eurofighters now, but they fly them through up in North Africa and Algeria and stuff. They fly these things at like 100 feet off the ground. It's crazy. The videos are insane. You should YouTube it.
Trust me, as an amateur Air Force junkie, I would. I already have. I'm not going to lie. But it's all good, my friend. I had an interesting day today. Before we get too into it, as you know, the first annual Caribou Paracon happens this weekend, and I took Grant Cameron, David Weatherly, and Ross Allison up to the Quesnel Museum to visit Mandy the Haunted Doll, and then we went up to the Barkerville area of British Columbia, where there's a big gold mine, and looked at the Haunted Museum there. And literally, we left at 8 o'clock this morning. I got back into my house to start getting ready for the show at 10 minutes to 8. I haven't eaten dinner yet, but sometimes you got to sacrifice. I've got enough in reserves, man.
You and me both.
Yeah, no kidding. My friend, the reason why we brought you on tonight was because we like to talk about these strange and weird conspiracies that are out there, especially involving the secret space program. NASA has done itself no favors over the years by neither confirming nor denying what has happened. We tend to believe that NASA is trying to tell everybody the truth, but there are those naysayers out there who believe that NASA continues to pull the wool over our eyes. Conspiracy theorists believe that we've never gone to the moon. Why don't we start there?
Okay. Well, I'm a firm believer we did go to the moon. I know people who believe we didn't. I definitely believe we did. In fact, I think that beyond going to the moon, we actually have bases on the moon. I think you can find the tractor tracks and the tailings from mining operations and other stuff up there, and I think that we found stuff on the moon potentially.
What about the theory? What about the theory that Stanley Kubrick made these movies because the lighting seems off? You cannot see any stars in the background. I mean, people have looked for excuse after excuse as to why the moon landings have been faked.
So I'm not beyond believing that Kubrick helped fake stuff, right? Jay Widener's made a whole series of those called Kubrick's Odyssey, where he takes you through how a rear projection screen was used in 2001. And even when 2001 came out, people were really shocked by it. And even to this day, there are a lot of people that say, Stanley Kubrick did a better job on 2001 than NASA did. And I think that it's possible that he did help them fake stuff. If anybody was going to do it, Kubrick was the guy. Kubrick was also, he was a genius, but he was a little off. He didn't think the way that the mainstream world thinks. He was very smart, but he lived in his own kind of world. And I've heard interesting stories about people who worked with Kubrick. In fact, there's a funny one. I have a friend named Mr. Lobo, and he has a TV show called Cinema Insomnia. And he was interviewing the guy who played Frank Poole, Gary Lockwood. And he asked Gary Lockwood what it was like to work with Kubrick, because Kubrick was notoriously difficult to work with. And Lockwood said that he had always had a very good relationship with Kubrick and that he enjoyed working for him because of the way he made movies. And he told a story where he was sitting with Kubrick and they were talking about a scene for 2001. And the production designer came to Kubrick, and I believe it was a woman. She had the space suit, like an initial space suit. And Kubrick looks at the space suit and goes, "It's not right, go do it again." She's like, "Okay." And so she comes back she made some changes, and he's like, "No, there's something wrong with it. It's not right. Take it back and do it again." And at this point, she's getting kind of flustered. After about 4 or 5 of these, she finally comes back and she goes, "What the hell's wrong with it?" And Kubrick says, "Okay, here's what I want you to do." He said, "I want you to put that thing on. I want you to run all the way around where they were filming. I want you to jump up and down in it. I want you to roll around in the dirt. And then I want you to come back. And then it will be perfect." Because he needed it to be used. He wanted it to look used. It's like when you watch 2001, the first half of the movie, there's very little sound. And when they're in space, there's no sound. There's no music. There's no nothing. Because Kubrick wanted to mess with time. He was messing with time. So when you watch the film, he's manipulating your perception of time. And he was very quick to say, there's no sound in space, so why do I have sound? They're going around and doing stuff. There's no sound, so I don't have sound. That kind of meticulous detail would have been very good for faking stuff. I don't think he faked the whole landing, or he probably would have done a better job. I think what he did, if he did anything, is that he helped them to fake chunks of it to cover up things that they didn't want us to see, which would have been a base. I mean, how terrible would it be when they're driving the lunar lander around. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's a dome over there, you know. Oh, wait a second, is that a space plane? You know, it wouldn't have worked out for the whole we just landed on the moon thing. So, you know, there are some weird things that you see, the rock with the C on it, or, you know, when they're driving the lunar rover, you know, the mountains in the back, it's like Looney Tunes. You keep seeing the same mountains over and over again, you know, that kind of thing. And so I think that's the kind of stuff that he would have helped them with, to cover up stuff that was already there.
Very, very strange indeed. And I'm a firm believer that we went to the moon too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think the astronauts that have been up there, and probably, you know, everybody talks about Neil Armstrong being the first man, but I look at, you know, from a UFO standpoint, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Now, there's a man who has, after the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who has literally nothing to lose by coming out and saying UFOs and aliens are real, to be able to talk about the Apollo missions and him walking on the moon. Why would he lie about that? There is no reason for him to lie.
Well, and there's also the famous C-SPAN interview with Buzz Aldrin where, you know, they're kind of doing a whole thing about magnificent desolation. And then he stops. He goes, you know, because they were talking about budget cuts to NASA. And Aldrin has always been a very big proponent of the adventure of space, that humans have to do it because it's the last great adventure. We can go to the bottom of the ocean. We need to go to the other planets in our solar system. And he says, you know, I forget exactly how he put it, but he said, you know, there's weird stuff out there and we need to find it. He says, you know, there's a monolith on one of the moons of Mars, on Phobos. There's a monolith. He says, it's a monolith. You can see it. It's really clear. He says, I don't know who put it there. God put it there. The universe put it there. Aliens put it there. I don't know, but we need to go figure out what that thing is. And then they cut him off and had a caller call in to talk about airlocks. You know, a lot of these guys, as they get older, you know, they let stuff slip out. It does happen.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I don't know who was hosting that night, but why didn't they run with that?
I don't know. I would have.
How do you not run with that?
I don't know.
You have an astronaut talking about monoliths on the moon on a live broadcast, and you take a caller to ruin that momentum.
And when he took the caller, because of the context switch, Aldrin looked very dazed. That he was like, "What? Huh? You're stopping me?" And then the guy wanted to talk about airlocks because Aldrin's an engineer, and he had designed an airlock. It was very weird. Find it on YouTube. It's bizarre.
I will look into that. Our audience should too. Absolutely. So with that, there's also the conspiracy out there that Neil Armstrong was recorded on an emergency channel when he first landed on the moon, saying something of the sorts of, they are here, they are on the hill, and they are watching us.
Right, and I think Buzz Aldrin said something about, those are really huge, I don't think they're ours, or something like that. They kept telling him to go to the medical channel, Yeah. Well, I mean, they're trained observers. I mean, if they saw something bizarre, they were going to relay it. You know, their mission was to, make it to the moon, as I look at the moon right now, make it to the moon, survive that. Once you get there, you know, go walking around on it and record everything you can think of. Then get back on the thing and survive the trip home. That was really their mission. But, you know, you have to remember is that when they actually landed, they landed off target. They didn't land where they were supposed to land. And I think that the preparations had been made for that landing site. And, you know, I've spoken of this more than once, that when you listen to the actual descent phase, you know, Armstrong's piloting it. And he's like, he tells Aldrin, you know, you got to tell me fuel consumption and altitude, because they were running low on fuel. And they were just looking for a place to put that thing down. So they were off target. They were in a place that probably wasn't prepared. They probably saw things they weren't supposed to see.
Is that why, you know, Neil Armstrong went silent for so many years? Never really wanted to talk about it?
I think so. He taught and spoke a little bit, but he became very low profile. And Aldrin was the one that was more out there, the public face of the mission, that Armstrong, whatever happened to Armstrong up there, and we'll never know, but whatever happened to Armstrong up there had a profound effect on him. And to be perfectly honest, we deal in conspiracies, and sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong. The act of landing on the moon may have had such a profound impact on him that he just was done. Or maybe he saw stuff. I don't know.
Did he want to be a hero, though? Because, let's face it, the ticker tape parade and everything that went along with it, a lot of people could sit there and say he didn't want that type of attention. He just wanted to go to space, and he made it. But a lot of people, but there's also like yourself out there, Olav, who are saying maybe he saw something up there that just absolutely wrecked him.
I don't know if it wrecked him. I think it blew his mind. And when your mind gets blown, my mind got blown when I was 8. I'm still okay. But I think that he, everybody has always talked about him having been shy and somewhat, withdrawn and very, very analytical, but very much in his head. And I think that when he came back, I think it's a combination. I think that the fact of landing on the moon was so profound to him that it was such an insane adventure that it was the pinnacle. And I think it was also that he saw stuff. And instead of lying about it, he just chose not to say anything. Because that's the honest way to do it, right? That if you know somebody's genuinely been exposed to things of a secret nature, top secret, the color codes and all the other levels of secrecy we have. When you come across the rare person that really has pulled the curtain back and seen the wizard, it has a profound impact on them. And it definitely, I wouldn't say that it makes them reclusive. Armstrong was, but it makes them very introspective, which he certainly was.
You don't think it was fear?
No, I don't think it was fear. I don't think anybody feared him going off his rocker. And going out and start talking about stuff. He was very patriotic, as is Aldrin. They're heroes, right? I don't think anybody should ever take that away from them. They believed in what they were doing. They went, they did something dangerous, they came back, they did a magnificent job. But I think that it was really about honesty. I think that Armstrong, whatever he saw, he didn't want to lie. And so instead of that, he just didn't say anything. And I think that for Aldrin, I don't think he wants to lie either. He just doesn't say anything either. But he's okay with talking about the rest of it, where Armstrong just didn't want to talk about any of it. Aldrin can segment it and say, well, I'm just not going to say anything about that other stuff because I have a secrecy oath and I made a commitment, and I'm not, I don't want to lie and say I didn't see anything. I'm just not going to say anything at all. Because, nowadays he'll tell you, he's like, we saw weird stuff up there. He doesn't lie. He tells you the truth. It's just, he doesn't expand upon it.
Yeah, why do you think that's though? Is it the loyalty to NASA and the program? Is it loyalty to the military? Why isn't Buzz Aldrin, if he saw something, the voice of what is up there?
Well, I think he is now. I think that conversation about Phobos was a glimpse of that. And he's talked about other weird stuff. He just doesn't talk about the moon. And I think it's because he's a patriotic guy and he made a promise. And that's something nowadays that I don't think is stringently enforced. But back then, they were very committed. And I think if you meet somebody who really has been exposed to significantly secret stuff, that a lot of those guys, they take that commitment of not saying anything, they take it extremely seriously. And everybody does it for a different reason. Maybe it's patriotism to the country. Maybe it's a personal thing that, you're as only good as your word or whatever, but they just don't say anything at all.
Are you surprised that even with astronauts today, there's been very few that have come out to say that they've actually seen craft, even with the shuttle missions? I believe Story Musgrave said he saw something anomalous as well.
No, because I think that some of them are driven by fear. I don't think that the Apollo astronauts were driven by fear. I think they were driven by commitment. But nowadays, I would say, there might be a fear element, because the world has changed a lot since the 1970s, the 1960s. In 68, it was a very different country than it is today. We had different values. We had a different way of looking at the world. And a lot of these guys were coming out of Korea. They had fought in Korea in the 50s, and I think they had a different perception. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does, and I can see where that's going on. I mean, these guys were bigger than rock stars, the Apollo astronauts.
Oh,
they were bigger. They were bigger than the president. They were for a moment there. They were bigger than the Beatles.
They were. They had done the most heroic, amazing things that any human being could comprehend. But in the time since then, right? I've always argued that it happened when Kennedy was assassinated. That when Kennedy was assassinated, that's when the notion of modern conspiracy theory was born. That nobody that I've ever met that was alive when Kennedy was assassinated believes that Oswald did it. I mean, I know a guy, he thinks that Oswald did it, but he thinks there were backup shooters just in case. Right? So, there's always some level of conspiracy to it. And even the people that will tell you that Oswald did it, they'll tell you that Oswald did it because of the Soviets, or Oswald did it because of Johnson, or Oswald did it because of the mafia, or Oswald did it because of. There's always some reason. It's never, there's always some level of conspiracy wrapped around Oswald. It's never Oswald was a lone nut who just thought that Kennedy needed to be taken out and engineered this whole thing to make it happen. Nobody ever believes that. No one. And ever at that point, I think that the United States and the world in general, I think, lost their innocence in believing the story that we tell about ourselves. That, up until that point, I think that there was a belief that we were the chosen ones, that the United States, was the shining castle on the mountain. And at that point, they were no longer the shining mountain on the castle. I mean, the shining castle on the mountain.
I totally see that.
Yeah. And there's more distrust, and then things start to break down after that, right? In the 70s, there's all, assassinations in Central and South America. In the 80s, Iran-Contra, drugs for guns, Leon Klinghoffer getting shot down over Nicaragua or whatever. the thing starts to break down, and the more it broke down, the less shiny the castle became, and the exposure of ultra, the exposure of the syphilis experiments, it just all started to implode, and the whole Watergate. I think Watergate really accelerated it, but people stopped looking at the government and trusting every word they said. They started looking at the government and saying, well, maybe they're not telling us the truth.
So getting back to the astronauts for a minute, how many do you think, or have you talked to any astronauts personally that have told you what they've seen up in space?
I have never spoken to an astronaut. I spoke to a guy who performed ESP experiments with Edgar Mitchell when he was in space. And he claimed that they had like moon pot, but no, I've never spoken to an astronaut. Everything that I've ever read about it has been, through research. Well, I take that back. I talked to a cosmonaut once. I did talk to a cosmonaut. I did not talk to an astronaut. I talked to Georgy Grechko, and he was in Mir for a long time. And I asked him what it was like to live in Mir, and he said, well, it's what you'd imagine. It's a little tiny cylinder. I said, well, no, what was it really like? And he said, pretend you're living in a Coke can for 6 months. He said, that's what it's like. And I asked Grechko if he had seen stuff while he was in Mir. And Grechko said that they did see stuff. They saw weird stuff, but that they couldn't identify. But he was very quick to point out that they probably weren't UFOs. It was probably just space junk. But I did talk to a cosmonaut once.
So when you were getting your information, how are you, besides scouring the internet, how are you getting your facts that the astronauts, or the majority of them, have seen some sort of craft or had some sort of contact?
Research is done in a lot of different ways. I read a lot of books. I watch a lot of documentaries, a lot of interviews, scour the internet. Pretty much, I look in every possible place I can for what I'm looking for. So, if you take a subject and then I just kind of go out and get everything that I can find that was written about it, talked about it, videoed about it, and that's how I do it. Because I have a rule. When I do research, everything that I research has to be publicly available.
A lot of people could say that, though. And I'm going to press you here for a second, my friend. A lot of people
Sure.
can say that, though. And they could be completely wrong.
It's true. And that's why when you research something, right, you go out and you look at everything. And then you cross-index it. Because if somebody's lying, right, they usually, if you have 10 sources of information and one of them is out in left field, by cross-indexing all 10, you can usually find the lies. Because they're not all lies. So you can usually ferret out the lies pretty rapidly. One of the things that I have as a person is a talent for connecting dots. And, professionally it helps me. Research-wise it helps me. And really it's about connecting the dots. It's connecting all the dots together, creating a mesh, and seeing where the holes are in the mesh. And usually where the holes are in the mesh, that's the stuff that's not true. Because you have to remember something. When you're dealing with something like disinformation, for example, right? The disinformation has a structure. The disinformation is engineered. And it's engineered for a purpose, okay? So if I'm going to spread disinformation out there, in order to make it plausible, there's always something in there that's true. And it's called the golden thread. That somewhere in this disinformation program, there's something true. And if you cross-index it across other things, then you'll find the truth. And I talk to people, and I read, and I do research and find information, and you find some very interesting stuff by doing that.
I get that, but how do you trust the information that is out there? How do you trust when you're hearing it from second-hand, third-hand, fourth or fifth-hand information? It's like you may have the greatest clue to a murder mystery, but if everybody's fingerprints have touched it, how do you know it's really real?
Because you take all the people who have touched it, and then you start researching them, and you figure out where they were at what time. That's investigation. Even though there are 5 sets of fingerprints on a handgun, right? Once you know the pedigree of the handgun, when it was manufactured, how it came to be in the possession of these 5 people, then you know the 5 people, and then you start looking at, well, where were you at this time? Well, what were you doing? Do you have gambling debts? Did this person, do something to you? And that's how you investigate and find the solution, is that you have to cross-index. It's all about cross-indexing.
So let's get to the third conspiracy on the Apollo missions. Everybody seems to believe that the Apollo missions were shut down after the 17th one, and that public relations was starting to dwindle. People were starting to question, okay, we've walked on the moon, now what? People were not interested. Television ratings were down. The TV companies didn't want to replay it anymore.
Yep.
And yet, here we are, potentially saying there actually was Apollo 18, Apollo 19, and Apollo 20.
Right. So the story of Apollo 20 is actually a very interesting one. And there are very specific reasons why I think that it may actually be true. Now, conventionally, a lot of people look at the story of Apollo 20 and think that it's a hoax, and it's been attributed to a French performance artist. So the story goes is that one day, this guy who went by the name of, so this guy appears, and he, I forget the handle that he used on YouTube. You can still find it. What was it? It was something AFB. Anyway, this person on YouTube starts posting these videos. And what they were conversions from 16 millimeter film to video, and then they uploaded them. And there's some pretty crazy stuff on there. There's a LEM, the lander, moon lander. There's, people in spacesuits and all kinds of stuff. So there's a guy named Luca Saltimbuco, who is an Italian UFO researcher. He came across this. He contacted the guy who had posted these films on YouTube, and he interviewed him over Yahoo Messenger. Never met him, but interviewed him over Yahoo Messenger. And the guy claimed that his name was William Rutledge, that he was actually the mission commander of Apollo 20, that Apollo 18 had mechanical problems, 19 had suffered a catastrophic failure, and 20 was successful. And basically what had happened is that during some phase of photography of the moon, that they had found a large alien spacecraft that had crash landed on the moon, and that they decided to send a mission to the moon to go through it and see if they could recover stuff. And there's films of them orbiting the moon, flying over the object. They had taken the camera and put it up against the window and filmed flying across the object, all kinds of stuff. And so one of the problems with the films is that the audio tracks are in very poor condition. And the guy had claimed that the audio tracks were damaged when he had it converted to video. And the Luca Saltimbuco had asked him, Scalambulo, I always mess this guy's name up. You'll find him. Google it. He had, we'll just call him Luca. He had asked this guy Rutledge, where he lived, because when he was interviewing him, the English was very poor, and the guy said that he was living in Rwanda, and the Italian researcher had said, "Well, why are you living in Rwanda? It's not exactly a garden spot." And Rutledge had replied that he had fallen in love with a girl, and he had moved to Rwanda to be with her, and he doesn't speak English anymore, so his ability to speak English was slipping. And later analysis of the videos, turned out that some of the audio tracks were inconsistent. They had actually been taken from other missions, or they were of nonsense or whatever, right? So it's all very bizarre, okay? Eventually, Rutledge pulled the videos, let's call him Rutledge, had pulled the videos and moved them to another site called Reaver, and Reaver shut down. What Rutledge claimed was that the 20, the one that he was in command of, and there was a mission patch and all this stuff, and very consistent kind of stuff. He had claimed that it was a joint mission. He was a commander. Alexei Leonov, I believe it was Alexei Leonov, was a cosmonaut. He went up, and then there was a woman, I can't remember her name, but she was from AT&T Bell Labs, and she had gone too. And the intent was that they were supposed to find this UFO. So they land on the moon. All the videos there. You can watch it. They land on the moon. They go out. They find this thing. They go inside. They walk around inside of it for quite some time. They're able to find, I guess, the cockpit, for lack of a better term. In the cockpit, they found a dead woman, and then they found a dead man, and the man had been decapitated in the crash. And they said that he said that inside the UFO it was heavily damaged because it had obviously been some sort of forced landing. And so that, there was damage inside, and the man had actually been decapitated. So they went ahead and recovered the woman's body. Hold on a moment. I'm on my phone. Sorry.
No problem. Hey, we're all dads. Dads are. If you need dad time, we're on a break here in like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes.
I'll be there in a minute. I'll be there in 2.5 minutes. Sorry, yes, I did need some dad time.
That's okay. That's very much okay.
Anyway, okay, so he'll be okay for 2 minutes. So basically, they go inside, they recover, they go radio back to NASA. They tell them to recover the bodies. They didn't have enough space for both bodies, so they took the female body, brought it back to the lander, and then they took the head of the male and brought him back to the lander too. And then there's a lot of video of them, examining the body. They got a whole bunch of paperwork is the best way I can describe it, and some other stuff. The woman was very interesting. She has kind of, I want to say kind of like Central American Indian features, and then she had a device that was attached to her forehead, and it looked like it was some sort of like a bone. And in the video they actually take the device off, and there's like a third eye. And they recovered a whole bunch of stuff. Then they went back to Earth and they covered it up. And the mission was supposedly launched in, I think, 1976 from Vandenberg. So, on the surface of it, it sounds insane. And when you watch it, you're thinking to yourself, this is insane, right? But there are very specific things about it that are very real, and they're very strange. And if it was fake, then they shouldn't be there, right? It's like a detail that would have been lost in a hoax. Does that make sense to you?
It totally does. It totally does.
Okay.
And I do understand, but there's a lot of people out there who will say that this is very easy to make in a studio.
Right.
I mean, to you and
Right.
I, or to anybody logical, it seems a waste of time.
Right.
To fake
Well,
something
so-
like that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it's the magnitude of the fakery. For example, the object that they're going after, it's huge. I mean, it's like a mile long, and it's a cigar-shaped UFO, right? When they're filming flying over it, okay, he has the camera up to the window, and you can actually see the glass. So on a LEM, there are these cuts into the window that are it's like for altitude, that you use them to like compute altitude. It's kind of like in a rifle scope. There'll be etchings into the rifle scope so that you can figure out distance, like distance, elevation, etc. Well, those are cut into the LEM windows too. And they actually cut them into the LEM window. When he shoves the camera up to film this thing as they're flying over it at a very obtuse angle, so it's a very hard shot for him to make, you can see the etchings. So to fake it, they would have had to actually have etched the window. Okay?
Right.
The second...
Olav, hold on to that second point. We're going to pick that up right after the break, my friend. Olav Phillips is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We're talking the secret Apollo missions, 18, 19, and 20. We're going to learn more about the Mona Lisa as well. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back after this break.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4 Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
There's news, and there's The Encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Beamer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, battling a little bit of a cold here. Yes, I got the worst cold in radio. I got that sinus cold. It's not very fun, but thanks for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, it's the SOR Paranormal Roundtable, where I bring in some friends, and we go over the month that was. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. We welcome back everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio, and all of our archives are free at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Epithalamion, Epithalamion is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night, right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at the store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, if you're still looking for a weekend getaway, the first annual Caribou Paracon begins tomorrow at Spruce Hill Resort and Spa. Tickets are $150 Canadian. Come on up. Come enjoy yourself. Come get weird with us. We'd love to see you there. Tonight we are talking with Olav Phillips. Olaf is the editor of Paranoia Magazine. You can find that online at paranoiamagazine.com. We are talking about the secret Apollo missions. Did they happen? Did they not? Right before the break, Olav, welcome back, by the way, we were talking about the ship that was up there that apparently Apollo 20 found. And I had asked you whether or not, or how we know this is real. And you were going to break down section number 2 as to why you believe this happened.
And I want to assure all the listeners, the cricket has been found and released into the wild. So we're cricket free now, and I can continue. So so the number one is the fact that the etchings, which are consistent with an actual, let's say, production LEM, were there, and that's something that a lot of people would probably miss. It's something that isn't very common when you see static displays of LEMs, unless they were actual production versions that NASA had made. So the second thing is about the ship. So you've got this ship. It's like a big kind of tube-looking thing that's probably about a mile long. One of the interesting things when they're filming it is that the surface of the ship is actually etched, that it has grooves in it, and those grooves look very Mayan. That if you're familiar with Mayan iconography, the design of it is very Mayan. And the woman herself looked actually very Mayan. Remember, I had said that she had kind of a Central South American Indian kind of facial features and coloring. And the ship itself had iconography that looks very Mayan-esque, right? But one of the things that was very interesting to me when I looked at it, watching the frames as they're flying over this thing in orbit around the moon, is that the ship itself had suffered quite a bit of damage. And along the surface of it, you could see where there were meteor strikes. And you could see where there were small meteor strikes and big meteor strikes. And what was interesting is that the material that the thing is made out of, that around the meteor strikes, it had been melted, that it looked molten and deformed, consistent with something hot striking it at an angle. So in order for that to be simulated, you would either have to, it would be very detailed to try to simulate that. The other thing is that the object itself can be found on official NASA photography. That if you go find where this thing is and you look it up, you can actually download pictures taken by NASA of this place, and you will see this thing sitting there. It's not like it was contrived and invented just for the quote-unquote hoax. That the thing actually does exist in the Guyot crater, and you can find photos of it, and you can almost make out the iconography on the photos, right? But that's not what really did it for me. There are two things that really, really did it for me that make me believe it. Number one, when they after they land, there's a lot of film. After they land, there's more film looking out and kind of panning around at the surface of the moon, right? One of the things that you notice out of the corner is that there's a large machine sitting in front of the LEM, right? And the machine itself is something called a Lukenhold. Now, a Lukenhold is a Soviet lunar probe. They were enormous. In fact, I saw one at the Evergreen Aerospace Museum. I mean, they're ginormous. They're huge. And the proportion of it is correct to the LEM, right? It's also interesting that there's a Lukenhold sitting there Because the Lucan holds, you think to yourself, well, why would there be a Soviet-era lunar rover next to this top secret landing, right? Well, we have to remember that one of the things that Rutledge claimed, or whoever Rutledge was, that Rutledge had claimed, is that one of the people on board was a Soviet cosmonaut, Leonov. It would make sense that the thing's sitting there because the thing has a transponder and a transceiver, because the Soviets were sending it commands and receiving telemetry. Theoretically, if you knew this thing was pretty close to where this object had crashed, you could actually lock onto its transmitter and use it as like a directional beacon and land next to it, because you knew that if you landed next to it, you'd be X distance from this object, right? So it makes sense that it's there. It's also, if I'm going to hoax something, why would I put it there? It's something a little bit arcane for Western audiences. I mean, the guy who supposedly faked this is French. You know, it's not something we go into a lot in school, the Soviet space program and the Soviet lunar exploration program. So to know what this thing was, to know what it was capable of, and to know the specifications of how big it was, you'd have to do a fair amount of research to find it. The other thing that's interesting is that I once went on a show, another radio show, and where we're talking about this thing, and the guy who hosts the show, his friend is a mortician. Okay, so he had his friend come on and watch the film, and he watched the film oddly while he was on the radio, and my friend asked him, says, "Well, so what do you think?" And he says, "Well, I mean, I'm watching a video, so it could be anything." That's true, fair enough. But, you know, that's a dead body. And Doe says, "Well, what do you mean it's a dead body?" He goes, "Well, I'm a mortician. I'm telling you, that's a dead body." And so why do you think it's a dead body? You said, "Look, I'm willing to put my reputation on the line and tell you that's a dead body." And the reason is that he said that he had actually seen dead bodies, obviously, that were flash frozen. Okay, like suddenly the temperature drops rapidly and the person kind of just freezes in place. And he said that one of the interesting things that happens with a body when you freeze it that way is that there's oil on your skin, right? Because our skin has to be hydrated. The fluids that actually hydrate our skin, when you basically freeze dry it, they come to the surface and it creates a kind of wax. And he said in order to know that wax would be formed, you'd have to be a mortician, because nobody else would really bother to know, what happens after death. And he said that in this case, in this scenario that was laid out for him, that this body had been in an object that had crash landed on the moon. It's airless, so there's no decomposition. It's extremely cold, and there's no air. He said that's very consistent with the condition of the body, that the body had this kind of waxy residue, and that's something that he had actually seen and was taught about in mortuary sciences. The other thing that's really weird about it is that Leonov himself, at the time when this thing supposedly occurred, Leonov himself was MIA. That the records of he's a very famous guy, and what he was doing during that time, it just simply says he was on vacation. So for like 3 weeks, he was just on vacation. It doesn't say where he was on vacation to. Nobody seems to know where he went. He was just on vacation, which is odd. Yeah, but there are obvious problems, right? This guy Rutledge doesn't seem particularly truthful. I moved to Rwanda. I live in Rwanda. I paid some guys in Rwanda to convert this film. What's interesting, though, about the film is that it has NASA headers. So, it'll have the kind of placard that they would put down with the information about when it was shot, where it was shot, how it was shot. That's true. There's a great book about that. I forget the name of it, but there's a book where it's all just secret patches, and you have no idea. people who worked on the program. Well, there's a patch. The patch is on it. It's real. It's on the suit, the space suits. The space suits have their names on them. I mean, it's just little things that seem to add up, you know. And the films themselves are very short. There are some that were obviously faked. I think they were faked later, where they were going through a city. It was obviously computer generated. But the films themselves, where they actually go, you know, and they go and they film flying there. They film, you know, kind of examining the body, peeling the headpiece off, taking the clothing off. You know, it's all very interesting to watch. And it seems like they're actually doing this. And again, the mortician said that was he confirmed it was a dead body. The other thing that's very interesting is that they recovered a fair amount of paperwork, as I call it, that it was paper with writing on it. And what was interesting about the writing is that the writing was very much like cuneiform. And in order to have made the amount of cuneiform writing on these pads, books, I guess, it would have taken a really long time. And the other part about it is that the condition of whatever the paper is, that it's a little brittle, and that would be consistent with being freeze dried and in that kind of an environment for an extended period of time. And he talked about in the interview, he talked about the fact that some of the stuff that they found went to pick it up and it would turn to dust. The other thing that's very interesting is that the suit that the woman was wearing, at one point they actually removed the suit and they're looking at it. And inlaid into the suit, there's a kind of geometry to the suit that looks like circuitry. That there's actually circuitry in the suit that was being worn. Some sort of flexible circuitry. And again, you know, in order to simulate that, it would have taken a tremendous amount of time. But I think the things that really, the Lukenhold being there is a very odd thing to put in a hoax. And it makes a lot of sense on why it would be there. I mean, I don't know for sure that the whole thing isn't a hoax, but it's one of those things where it seems to make sense. Especially the damage on the ship, and the fact that you can see the ship clearly on NASA photography. You know, you can go to the NASA website and download the photos. I mean, it's there. You know, so it really makes you wonder.
I want to take a few steps back here, and let's go to Apollo 18. Now, you said that one, Apollo 18 and 19 failed. Where were they launched from?
Vandenberg. And there was an unannounced launch in the time period that it supposedly occurred at Vandenberg. But yeah, they were all launched from Vandenberg. Vandenberg actually has the capability to launch a Saturn V. It did at that time. You know, it was a backup launch site. So, I mean, all that kind of stuff makes sense.
And when were these alleged launches supposedly taking place?
I believe 20 was launched. I believe they were all launched in 1976, 1977.
And how would the public not see a giant rocket going up into the sky for miles upon miles?
Well, apparently they did, but as is very common, you know, it was explained away as being a ballistic missile test or whatever. Because if you look at a Saturn V, it's you know, the rockets that they use were originally designed as ICBMs. So if you watch a Saturn V launch and you don't know that it's a Saturn V, and the government tells you that it was a ballistic missile test, at that time, you know, you're probably not going to entirely believe it, but you're probably not going to really care a whole lot about it either.
True that. And at that time, you know, you took the media, you took the military for their honesty.
Less so the military, more so the media. You know, it's funny. People now, you know, they watch something like Anchorman. I love that movie. It's so funny, but...
Oh, so do I.
But it's true. It's true in a lot of ways. I mean,
Hugely.
I remember... Oh, yeah. I remember in the early 80s, you know, watching local news, and they did those kinds of shots where they were all walking along, and, these guys were all stars, and if they told you that it was a missile test, you'd believe it. It was that kind of a time.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally get that. On a complete sidebar, I went with a couple journalist buddies to watch Anchorman, and we were blown away by how accurate it is in a newsroom. We were just blown away.
It is, and people don't realize that. But it is, as funny as it is, directionally, it's actually very true.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of stuff that they would do in between takes, and but so it's Apollo 20 is one of those things that it's like a alternative 3, and I think that's what attracted me to it. That on the surface of it, that it's like, this is fake, right? But when you start to look at it, there are things that are very fake about it. The footage of them driving to the city and all that crap, that's all fake, right? The story that Rutledge tells, it's got more holes than Swiss cheese. I mean, it's horrendously stupid. It's almost so stupid that it's insulting, right? But I think the facts are true, or at least they're directionally true. It's like Alternative 3. Is Alternative 3 real? Absolutely. Is the film real? Absolutely not. But I think that some of that footage is real. Maybe some of the footage is not. Maybe some of it was faked. But there's definitely footage there that when you watch it and you go through it frame by frame, and like the Lukenhold, if you're going to bother to put that thing there, I mean, this thing's like, I don't know, 12, 13 feet long. It's got to be about 5 feet high. I mean, this thing's enormous. It's huge, right? It's only in the film for probably 4 seconds. I only saw it because I was going through it frame by frame. You see it through the corner of the window. When you actually watch it, the first few times I watched it, I never even saw it. Only because I was like, I'm going to go through this frame by frame. Then I saw it. It's like, if you're going to hoax it, why would you go to the tremendous effort to build this thing only to put it in there for like 3 frames or 3 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever? I guess that'd be like, what, 60, like 120 frames, 30 frames a second. So 120 frames of this thing. It doesn't make any sense. But the audio track's fake. I think Rutledge, my gut instinct about Rutledge is that Rutledge is, the person pretending to be Rutledge is not Rutledge, but had this stuff and tried to devise a way to release it without exposing who they were. So they concocted a story. It's the golden thread, right?
Getting to Apollo 19, you said there was a disaster there.
Correct.
What happened?
So he claimed that it had achieved orbit, and that they had done the translunar injection burn basically to go from the Earth to the Moon, and they had some sort of catastrophic failure. And I believe the crew of 19 died. But he didn't go into that much detail about who they were, what their names were, or anything. He just said that I believe they had died on the translunar injection burn, that there had been some sort of a catastrophic failure inside the capsule.
Were the Russians involved in 18 and 19?
The Russians were involved in 18, 19, and 20, that they were complicit in it. And fundamentally, they'd have to be, right? That there's when we go launching rockets, right, we have to tell them so that they know that we're not attacking them, especially at that time when the Cold War was at its height. So, the fact that Leonov was on there was not surprising.
So let's talk about 20 again. Why get the Russians involved? Why send them up there? If there was so much hatred and animosity in the height of the Cold War, and, previous to this, we remember the scenes and the videos of Khrushchev taking off his dress shoe and banging it on his desk at the UN. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of tensions. Communism versus democracy in the West. It was a horrible time on the planet at that point.
I think that it was so monumental that we had to. I think that I've always maintained that these things like the Cold War are, it's theater. That, it's like now, right? We were talking about bear bombers going down the coast and launching F-22s from Elmendorf and CF-18s and all this, and Russian subs sitting in the, off right outside of Stockholm and all this kind of thing. And what's happened is the petrodollar has gone down. The Russian economy isn't so great. So what do you do when the economy's not so good? You start a war, right? And I think that a lot of these things were political theater. I don't believe that there was the level of hatred at the higher levels that we are led to believe. And for a lot of reasons. And especially around the secret space program context, the Russians are intrinsically involved in that. And I believe the Soviets were involved intrinsically with it as well. But, we needed an enemy, they needed an enemy, and so we constructed it. We fought proxy wars in Vietnam against the Russians. We fought a proxy war against the Chinese in Korea. But at the higher levels, I don't think that there was this level of ideological hatred that we believe there was. I mean, maybe for some people, but I think we've always been in cahoots with the Chinese and the Russians and the Europeans to do certain kinds of things, and that's definitely, I think this was definitely one of them. And I think we probably needed them for something. But that part is unclear.
So when you are looking at this whole Russia and United States coming together for this project, do you think at that time maybe, let's see, who would have been president in 76? Would that have been Jimmy Carter?
I think it would have been Carter.
Carter or Johnson, right?
I think it would have been Carter.
Ford or Carter.
I think it was Carter.
Okay, so with that, if we take a look at that, do you think that maybe Carter phoned up the Russian dictator at that point?
I think it was Brezhnev at that time.
Yeah, and basically said, look, we've got an issue here. We've found something. We need to deal with this as humanity, not as America versus Russia.
I think that's precisely what happened. I think that we found it. Possibly we launched 18, and we tried to launch 18 and had a problem. And the Russians knew it. And I think that Carter probably called up Brezhnev and said, hey, we got a problem. This isn't something we can take care of by ourselves. Or Brezhnev called Carter and said that, the gig's up, man. You gotta let us in on this one. It was probably something at that level. Because, we, as bad as the Cold War was, we had also done, the Soyuz link up where we had during one of the Apollo missions, we had linked up with one of their capsules and traded flags and had, handshakes and big hugs. So that, on a space level, even publicly, it wasn't so bad, right? So, I think that's precisely what happened. I think for some reason, either the Soviets demanded to be a part of it or we offered it to them. However that went down, I think that's definitely what occurred, if it's real. And again, the final calculus, you have to watch it. And when you watch it, you kind of make up your own mind. There are specific reasons that I've outlined why I believe it's probably true. The unscheduled launch, during that time period of something fairly large, Leonov being missing, there are tangential things that seem to add credence to it.
So when you see this video, and I've seen it, and there's long versions, there's shorter versions, they're on YouTube, how does a video of this utter importance get leaked if this is real?
very carefully. By a guy who covered it. By a guy who covered it up by saying he lived in Rwanda.
No, I understand that. And I can appreciate that. Okay, and I know where you're going with that, but the main thing is, like, how does it end up on YouTube? Because YouTube's the first place to go for mistrusted videos.
That's probably why it was YouTube. Because there's enough plausible deniability that the guy, whoever it was that did it, knew that putting it up on YouTube got it out there. Some people would believe it, some wouldn't. Maybe it would make a difference. I would have to think that it would be philosophical, because most leaks are philosophical in nature. That somebody's upset by something. Maybe it was an archivist who came across the footage and got upset because they thought that the world needed to see it, whatever. But YouTube is the logical place to put it because it's free and you can upload it, but also because there's a level of plausible deniability, right? And you construct a straw man to be the person, who did it. Yeah, I'm Rutledge, right? I used an absurd screen name and constructed a story about being from Rwanda. To cover up who I really am. And then it was probably done from an internet cafe or somewhere that's not really traceable.
That's a long stretch, man. I'm not trying to say you're right or you're wrong, but I'm saying that's a long stretch.
That's the thing, though. That's what actually intrigues me on a larger scale about conspiracies in general, because a lot of them are long stretches until you find something. The first few times I saw Apollo 20, my friend was convinced that it was real. I watched it, and I told him it was utter BS, right? And I watched it, and I'm like, no, this can't be real. They would have taken it down. Then again, if you take it down, that's like saying that it's real, right? For me, what made it possible, and all I've ever argued about Apollo 20 is that it was possible. There's not enough there to tell you concretely that it's real or it's not, right? It's an enigma. And the reason it seems plausible to me is these little bits and pieces that would have been absurd to fake. I mean, before I came on this show, did you even know what a Lucan hold is?
Me, no.
Right? Exactly. Not a lot of people. Not a lot of people would. And I think that's the power of it being there. But conversely, if I'm a hoaxer, putting it there would make people like me go, well, maybe it's plausible. And I think that Apollo 20 is important for a lot of reasons. One, it's an enigma, and it's a hell of a story. It really is. Fake or not, it's a hell of a story, and it's very entertaining. But number two, it draws into focus a larger problem that conspiracy theory faces, is that your fundamental question of how do you know that it's true? Even if, you look at MK Ultra, right? There was an entire Senate, investigation into Ultra. They published just reams and reams of stuff about Ultra, right? I mean, there's an index where you can literally see every Ultra program. It's somewhat redacted, but not heavily. You can see every Ultra program that was ever carried out. You can see the budget. You can see the summation of what they were after. You can see who did it. You can see where. But the problem is that all the documentation that goes under that, they burned it. So you're still trusting that whatever this index was, when it was released during the congressional hearings, that they didn't fake that. That's the thing. With conspiracy theory, you never know 100%. And I think that's why it intrigues me so much. But at the same time, you have to look at it and say, well, there are these little things that make it plausible. So what if it is real? And you have to ask yourself that question.
So do you believe deep down that this is a real project, or do you just think it's plausible?
I think it's real. That mortician, he put it on the line. You know, he was convinced, utterly convinced. And I look at the little things, and that's what conquered Alternative 3 for me. It was the little things. I'm watching Alternative 3, and they're going through the alternatives, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I've heard this before. Where have I heard this before? You know, and I thought to myself, you know, everybody says that it's real. Well, if it's real, then it should be provable. You should be able to find when they say there was a meeting with the American Chemical Society. Well, then let's go see if there's a meeting at the American Chemical Society. Oh, there was. Well, what did they talk about? Oh, Roger Revelle from Scripps said that we were all screwed because phytoplankton can't process carbon dioxide that fast. Okay, let's go to Alternative 1. It's the same way with this, right? That there was an unscheduled launch around that time period. Leonov was missing at that time period, right? You know, you'll never find anything on Rutledge, but, you know, then you look at the composition of the limb. I mean, the level of hoaxing would have been astronomical. I mean, it would have taken years. And you have to ask yourself, why would you spend years putting this together to hoax it? It's like crop circles, right? They always say, well, there are a bunch of guys with boards and they go out. Okay, that's true. But there are some crop circles that those guys even admit that they couldn't have done.
So who hatched this plan for 18 through 20 if they had announced they were shutting it down at 17?
It's hard to say. NASA would have had the photography. NASA would have had the information, the location. NASA had all that information. Who hatched the plan? Probably somebody in the deeper levels of government. You know, I can't see NASA hatching it because the Air Force actually would have had to have done it. It wouldn't have been a NASA rocket. It was an Air Force rocket launched from an Air Force base. And Rutledge claims that he was a military astronaut, and they do exist. There are military astronauts that are not part of NASA. So, you know, somebody inside the military industrial complex had to hatch it, I think. And of course they would have had to have had Carter's buy-in. But Carter's the kind of guy who would have gone for it, I think. You know?
Well,
but it makes you ask a lot of very interesting questions.
Right. And according to our listeners, in 76, it would have been Gerald Ford. 77 would have been Jimmy Carter.
Okay, well, then it would have been Ford, because I believe it was launched in 76.
Okay, good.
I always learn something. I was never good at all the presidents.
Well, I'm Canadian, so I have an excuse.
You do. You definitely do. But again, you know, for me, it's a hell of a story, and I love talking about it because it really is the kind of story where you can debate the merits of it because, you know, it has problems. And so it's good. It's an interesting discussion. And if it's real, you know, it's a hell of a find. And again, you know, you can find the ship on NASA photos. I mean, that's not hard to do.
Dale made a comment here. He goes, somehow I don't think there would be patches for a top secret mission.
That's not true. That's actually not true. I can't remember the book. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. They make patches all the time for top secret stuff. In fact, my favorite has a picture of an alien with a fork and a knife, and it says in Latin, tastes like chicken. But they make all sorts of crazy patches. One of the most famous is a secret squirrel, and it's a squirrel. It literally is just a squirrel. And these patches, they have all kinds of arcane symbols because it's like an inside joke. So the patch thing, that's not really a debate to me. I could totally see them doing that. That is actually, if you want to debate something that could be fake, I wouldn't debate that one with you, because, as I said, there's a whole book that's nothing but secret patches. And when you look at them, they're so obscure and arcane. They have constellations in them, Latin, Pig Latin. You know, they're weird. Do a search on top secret patches. They're bizarre. They really are.
I always liked the F-117 stealth fighters patches. Their slogan, "We own the night."
That's right. Absolutely. But there's some really, really clever ones, and there are some ones that are really thought-provoking. And when you look at them, some of the symbolism in some of the patches, they suggest some very interesting things. And frankly, a lot of them have aliens on them. Surprisingly, a lot of them have aliens. And there's one, I think it was a surveillance satellite, and it has like a picture of an octopus with the tentacles wrapped around the Earth. All kinds of craziness. The patches, yeah, they have all kinds of weird patches.
Yeah, because on the F-117 patches, there were 6 stars, 5 and a 1, which signified Area 51, because
Area
that's where
51.
they flew out of.
That's correct. Again, all kinds of arcane symbols, omega symbols, chemical symbols, all kinds of weird stuff. For your listeners, really, seriously, go on YouTube, search for top secret patches, and you will find some of the most bizarre patches you've ever seen. There's one with like an X-wing on it. It's crazy.
They are creative, that's for sure. Only a fighter
Definitely.
pilot's way to do that. Only a fighter pilot's way to do that.
But they're not all for fighter pilots. Some of them are for satellites. Some of them are for they do them for all kinds of things, missile tests, all kinds of stuff. It's not all fighter planes.
So getting back to Apollo 20, was the Mona Lisa and that ship that was discovered on the moon, was that discovered previous to 20, or did they see it on a satellite and that's why they went there? How did that work?
I forget which mission it was, but at one of the missions they took like the equivalent at that time of high resolution photos of chunks of the moon. And it's actually in one of those, for sure. Well, it's in a couple of them at different angles. Yeah.
So was the entire, because, we get to things here, they would have had to do a spacewalk, which means that they would have been, on a time limit for oxygen.
Right.
How long would they have had in that ship to get as much as they could?
That I couldn't tell you. I don't remember how long their oxygen would last. But it wasn't that long. It was a pretty high-speed operation. From what Rutledge had said, that they went in there and, I think they had to go in there multiple times to find where the quote-unquote cockpit was. And there was damage. And again, as I said, the male pilot had been decapitated, so they took his head.
Where would that head be now?
Who knows?
And what happened? And what happened to the Mona Lisa? They didn't obviously have room to bring her back.
They did. They actually put her in a bag and brought her back.
Where the
That's
hell
one
did
of
they
the
put her on the
problems.
limb?
They put her on the floor, strapped her down. That's one of the problems I actually have with it. One of the things that does make me question its validity is that they recovered an alien body and they didn't put it through some kind of decontamination. But then again, it was a different time, and it was freeze dried. So I guess they figured that any kind of microbes would have been destroyed. Which makes
a
sense.
head and a body coming on back.
A head and a body. Yeah.
That's hard to believe.
And
hard to imagine.
And they did a cursory examination of the body. There's footage of them doing a cursory examination of the body. That's the footage where the guy was like, "This is a dead body. I've seen this. I've actually seen this kind of a body." that was the other thing that really did it for me, is that made me think that it could possibly be true, is the mortician, because he was pointing out all kinds of things about the colors of the nails and the way the jaw was, and a lot of things that occur after death, and especially if the death is sudden, that there were certain elements of the way the body looked and elements of the body around the nails and other stuff that he said were consistent with a real dead body.
Chris is asking in the chat room, with all of this very, very supple information, is there any hardcore proof evidence that this happened, or are you just going on the feels or non-expert testimony?
Well, I think the mortician is, I would say that's some level of expert testimony. As is common with a lot of conspiracy theory, there's a lot of conjecture, and there's a lot of lining stuff up. I think for me, the fact that Leonov was missing during the time period when this supposedly occurred is big. I think the fact that there was an unscheduled launch from Vandenberg in that time period is big. But beyond that, it's a lot of nation of and looking at the way it was and what's contained within the film itself. That's why I said it's an enigma. The reason I love discussing it is because for everything that you can look at it and say, okay, well that makes you think it could potentially be legit. You also look at other things and you say, well, I don't know about that. That's why, I consider cut and dried, but every once in a while you need a good enigma, and Apollo 20 is an enigma. That's why I love talking about it, because people have never heard of it. So some people, when they watch it, it's like a huge brain explosion. They go, "Oh my God, this is real." Other people are like, "This is total BS," but it is interesting. It is a very interesting thing, and the Italian researcher, he has an entire book that is his interviews with Rutledge. So he he went in, he went on and on and on. So there's a fair amount of information in there to process. But this is a weird one for me, right, Dave? Usually I come on the show, it's something very clear, and it's like rock solid. This one is very much an enigma, and I'm very honest about that. But I do like this one, and I enjoy it because it's a real mind bender. Because there is just enough there to seem legit, and there's enough there to seem not legit.
Right, and you're not making a play either way. You're not coming in here saying this is absolute fact that this happened. Let's clarify that.
That's correct. I look at Apollo 20 objectively, and I'm perfectly happy to admit it. But at the same time, it was, when we were talking about all these things that are going on in the world, this came up because it was an enigma, because it would foster conversation. I mean, in this same conversation, you've taken me to task on quite a number of how things are done, procedurally, which I believe I've defended. But at the same time, it makes you ask hard questions in general, and I think that's important. But no, I'm not going to tell you that it's true or not true, because frankly, I don't know. I think it's a very interesting thing to look at, and I keep trying to push it further, but it's very difficult.
Is there anybody out there who has come publicly saying that these missions happened? Because for a launch to happen, it takes... I know, but I mean, for a launch to happen, it takes hundreds of people. Hundreds.
But again, you're assuming that the people who were involved in the launch necessarily knew what was going on, right? You're also talking about people that are sworn to secrecy. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why you wouldn't have necessarily have a whole fleet of whistleblowers that'll tell you all about it. Whistleblowers are actually very rare, because as much as we say we defend whistleblowers, we do not. So, that part is not necessarily surprising. I mean, look at Kennedy, right? We really don't have any concrete whistleblowers that lay it all out for you. The closest that that's ever come is E. Howard Hunt's deathbed confession to St. John Hunt. And in order to trust what E. Howard Hunt says, you have to trust E. Howard Hunt. And that is a very difficult thing to do. Trusting anything that guy said is dicey at best. What I do find interesting about that is that the way that E. Howard Hunt laid it out, there's actually a film called Executive Action with Burt Lancaster, which pretty much is, was shot in the 70s, and it pretty much lays out the assassination the same way that E. Howard Hunt described it. That could be good or bad. That could be E. Howard Hunt, playing one last mind game, because that's what E. Howard Hunt was good at. Playing one last mind game, pretty much having a deathbed confession that is Executive Action, the movie. So, Kennedy, I mean, for as much as people have delved into it, there's no concrete whistleblower that told you exactly how it functioned. Was it Lucien Sarti who pulled the trigger? Was it Oswald? Was it E. Howard Hunt? Was he at one of the hobos? Who knows, right? See, that's the thing about Apollo 20, Dave. That's why I knew you'd enjoy it, because it brings to surface a lot of problems in conspiracy in general. That there's a very clear kind of linkage between the problems with something like Apollo 20 and the problems with something like the Kennedy assassination. Right?
Right. No, I understand where you're going with that. And I could see that, this entire thing could be plausible. But why shut it down at Apollo 20?
They had achieved their objective. Maybe also the technology was, at that point, they had transcended the use of an Apollo mission to achieve it. Because remember, if you look at military planning for space, the prior to the whole space shuttle thing, right? And that comes online, about the same time that the 20 would have ended. The original planning involved rockets, LUNX and Horizon. Horizon's the Army, LUNX is the Air Force. The Air Force wanted to build a rocket that they could take to the moon and land and turn into a mobile command station. The Army wanted to load soldier astronauts into Apollo rockets and fire them to the moon, and then build pressurized Quonset huts and bury it under regolith. So the way that they wanted to do it still involved rocketry, where when you transcend it, I remember when I was a little kid and I watched the films, that the various defense contractors made, and they'd show them on NBC News of how the shuttle's going to work. It goes up on a rocket, and then they have these like schemes where there's like this airport on the moon, and these space shuttles keep landing and taking off from the airport, and obviously none of that came to fruition, at least publicly, right? But using an Apollo rocket, they had a bunch. They had the launch complex, they had the equipment, they had the training procedures. It would make sense to use it.
We only got about 2 minutes here before we got to go to break. And I want to ask you about the secret space program in all of this, because if this mission is happening, this alleged Apollo 20 in 1976, when did the secret space program start? Because there are rumors that we had been on the moon, people saying as early as the 60s.
Right. And I think we had. I think we just used rockets to get there. I think what you see is a change in the late 70s when they start to use space plane designs to get us there versus rockets. I think the 80s is really, I think the 80s is when we really started to go toward the space plane model versus, using a rocket. I think whatever we built up there previously, we rocketed up there. That was the plan. with Horizon and Lunex. The Russians had the same plan. It was called Zvezda. You know, and it just was, they were launching, you know, proton rockets to get the stuff up there. That's why I said, again, there's enough there, right? But the way they did it was consistent with the way the military had planned to do it, to use rockets. The Lunex is a little different because Lunex is the Air Force. So obviously their version of the rocket was super sophisticated with wings and all kinds of craziness. The Army one was a little more conventional, you know. And I don't think there were a lot of people up there in the 60s, you know, a couple dozen maybe, but, you know, there were people there.
On that note, I'm going to get you to hold on here until we come back from break. Olav Phillips is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We are talking the secret Apollo missions. Did they happen? Did they not? Is it just a wonderful, grandiose story? We'll find out more as we got Olav coming up and The Encounter with Everett Thiemer coming up at the bottom of the hour. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back after this.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources. You bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
From the mile-high state of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all in your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, it's the SOR Paranormal Roundtable. I bring in some friends. We go over the month that was. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. Hello to everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. Don't forget, all of our archives are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Epithalamion. Epithalamion is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, this weekend, the first annual Caribou Paracon is underway here at the Spruce Hill Resort and Spa. Come on up. It's going to be a great weekend. Ghost tours, UFO sky watches, great speakers, and you can hang out with me. It's going to be fun, like the Ukrainian watermelon is. Ron Moniak. It's all good. Tonight we got Olav Phillips in the house. We are talking about the secret Apollo missions. Did they happen? Did they not? Is the Mona Lisa alive and well, sitting in a NASA freezer? Who knows? It's all speculation, but it is plausible. as Olav says. Olav, welcome back.
Thank you.
No
I
problem.
have to say though, that the word, the secret password,
Yeah.
Epithalanian,
Yeah.
where does that come from?
Oh, nobody knows. I think what Bill does, and I've said this numerous times, I think what he does is he sits with a bag of Scrabble letters, and then he just throws them all together to whatever comes out.
Maybe.
That's what I think it is.
You know, speaking of aliens, I heard a story once about David Bowie that for some of his songs, I think especially during the Ziggy Stardust phase, that he actually would put a bunch of words into a bag and pull words out and then use that to construct the lyrics of the song. I don't know how true that is, but that's what I heard.
That's odd. Completely odd.
Talk about aliens. The man who
Aliens
felt
is
it.
okay. Aliens is
good.
okay.
Good movie. Anyway.
I think so. This leads into the secret space program and the Apollo missions. Because as we quickly stated right before the break, people have been saying we've been going to the moon since the 60s, that the secret space program has been alive and well ever since Project Paperclip. And
before that.
And even before. So how do you correlate the two? Are they two separate missions by NASA? Was NASA included in the secret space program?
I don't believe that NASA is included in the secret space program. I think that NASA and the Air Force and the DoD don't necessarily know what they're doing. So it is, you know, we were talking about the moon landing hoax and how they got people up there. You know, it's possible that they got people to the moon using rockets. It's also possible that they use much more exotic technology. And that, again, is one of the problems of Apollo 20, that it is inconsistent with the secret space program design, right? That, you know, the idea of the bell and this high-tech ability for us to get to the moon in hours instead of days and that all that, it does make you wonder that if they did Apollo 20, why would they use an Apollo rocket, right? The only answer that I have is that as I said, you could explain in the context of Apollo 20, you could explain that the early forms of the secret space program use rockets, right, which is consistent with Horizon and Lunax. And that they switched over to more of a space plane thing in the late 70s. But that's inconsistent with the ideas of the Bell, right, that this Bell thing exists and it's a propulsion system, et cetera, et cetera. And in my research, I've always argued that we've used saucer-shaped devices or space planes going way back. So my only answer to that is that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I believe 100% that the Bell is real and that we use it as a power source for very exotic ships, for lack of a better term. I also believe that we use space planes, right? Because, you know, discs and all this kind of thing, they're not necessarily a good thing to use in the atmosphere, and they may be better suited for out of the atmosphere kind of stuff. My explanation for Apollo 20 would be that whoever hatched this was not directly part of the secret space program. I know that sounds odd, but it's totally possible. And 20 may have been a more upfront, if it's real, it may have been more of an upfront NASA and the Air Force and you know, mainline components of the DoD came up with this and hatched this plan, right? And then, you know, whoever controls the secret space program would have gone in and said, okay, we need to clear out whatever we're going to do away from this thing. But it also argues the point of, well, if we knew this thing was there and we have much more high-tech devices, why would we bother going there at all? And that actually may have been more of an internal public relations stunt. But I do believe, and I mean, I've written books about it, that we had very, very sophisticated stuff, you know, back into the 40s, and Walter Bosley has found evidence that the bell was used as a power source for the arrows back in the late 1800s. There's a whole Prussian connection there, et cetera, et cetera. So if 20 is real, right, what it may represent is a public relations stunt for more mainline elements of the various governments involved. Because whoever's running the secret space program, I don't believe the DoD necessarily knows. I think the parts of the DoD know, but you know, the general in charge of the Air Force may know, but the rest of the Air Force may not. If that makes sense to you.
Where would they put these craft? Where would they hide this technology? Because with all the people camped out around Area 51, there's no point in putting it there anymore.
Well, I mean, they could hide this stuff all over the place. Look, I went to East Seti, the James Gilliland Ranch. I went to East Seti. I sat there. I watched it. I watched the black project planes fly over my head. I watched a hangar door open in the side of a mountain. If you could put a hangar door in the side of a mountain, hiding this stuff is not that problematic. You know, you could hide it in Antarctica. You could hide it in the Arctic. I mean, if you look at the Northwest Territories and the Yukon Territories of Canada, which, you know, you're Canadian, I mean, how much of that place do we really know anything about? I've been to the Yukon, man. There is nothing there. I mean, you drive for a day and you don't see anybody. So, you know, out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, out in the middle of nowhere through the Canadian Arctic, you know, which is the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, Prince Edward Island, you know, there's nothing up there. There's very few people, so hiding it would be okay. There's huge chunks of South America, you know, especially the Amazon, that nobody has explored, right? So, you know, Russia, there's massive amounts of Russia. There's lots of places to hide this stuff. Under the ocean, you know, I mean, it wouldn't, we think because we live in towns or cities that, you know, well, it'd be really hard. Well, no, it wouldn't. I mean, you drive through Oregon, there's huge swaths of Oregon where there are no people. So, you know, it's possible. Do I think they're at Area 51? No, absolutely not. Whatever they were testing in Area 51, you know, I think they cleaned it out because too many people camp out there. Dugway, Kirkland, White Sands, everybody goes out there waiting to see UFOs. Did I ever tell you the story about Beale?
No, fill me in.
So when I was at Davis, and I was a young UFO researcher, the first time I ever had a website, right? I put up this website, and it was funny. I put up some poetry that I had written, you know, arty kind of stuff that I had done. Nobody gave a crap about that. They all went to the UFO stuff. So I got rid of all the other stuff and just made it UFOs. And I had one morning, I got woken up on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock sharp. And, you know, I was a student. I was a teenager. It's like, you know, I had stayed out late the night before with my girlfriend and our friends, and we were going to sleep in until 1 p.m. You know how it is, right, when you're young. And so I'm laying there, and, you know, she's laying there, and I get this phone call, 8 o'clock sharp. And I pick up the phone, and this guy says, "Are you Olav Phillips?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Do you have a website called the S4 database?" I said, "Yes, I do." He says, "I have information for you." I said, "Okay." and I'm groggy. I am so groggy. And he says they're flying stuff out of Beale. Beale's they used to fly SR-71s, and they still fly U-2s out of Beale up in Yuba City. And he says, I know what the schedule is. So if you want to see some strange stuff, I'll take you up there and I'll show you. And I'm like, okay. Because for a long time it's been rumored that there was an Aurora squadron that actually flew out of Beale. And I said, okay. It goes, great. I'll call you back. Click. And so my girlfriend says, well, who is that? And I said, I don't know. Some guy. He said they're testing stuff up at Beale. He wants to take me up there. She's like, Beale? I said, yeah, it's the Air Force Base, like a little north of here. And she's like, and he called you here? And I said, yeah, he just called. That was him on the phone. She says, I thought we had an unlisted phone number. And I said, well, we do. And she said, did you put our phone number on the website? And I'm like, no. She said, but we have an unlisted phone number. How did he get it? I said, I don't know. And she got very pissed off, and she was convinced that I had been giving it out. And I said, no. And I showed her the website, and we're both groggy, right? And I showed her the website, no phone number. And she's like, well, how did he get our number? I'm like, I really don't know. And to this day, I still don't know. And the phone call only lasted a good 45 seconds. I mean, whoever he was, when he called me, the phone call was shorter than it would have taken for him to be traced. And for quite a while after that, we had a lot of phone problems with clicking sounds. It would reset my modem. Yes, the old days with modems. It would reset my modem, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, so they supposedly were testing stuff up at Beale. So, it's not hard to think that they could be testing stuff pretty much anywhere they want. There's huge chunks of desert that nobody goes to. And you put it underground, the hatch slides open, thing comes out, hatch slides shut. One of my favorite stories about S4, where Lazar supposedly worked, everybody was getting down on Lazar that he was lying, and he's lying. And he was talking about these hangars built into the side of this hill that's next to this dry lake bed. And so back in the day, I spent $150 as a student. I spent $150 to buy 3 meter, each pixel was like 3 meters, to buy 3 meter images of Papoose Lake where he said he worked. And with a very early version of Photoshop, I blew it up. And even at 3 meters, you could see the indentations in the hill where the hangar doors were. You could see the air shafts all over the hill where the air shafts were. So it's not hard to hide that stuff if that's what you want to do.
I have a listener named Joe. He lives about 40 miles north of Beale Air Force Base. Photographs the U-2 all the time, flying over his house. One time during this show, he actually photographed a black triangle flying over his house.
Mm-hmm.
And
not surprised.
So it isn't, the TR-3Bs, could they be out of Beale too?
It's possible. The guy said that they were testing stuff at Beale. And like I said, the rumor was that there was an Aurora squadron that was actually operating out of Beale. But I always got the sense that the Aurora was not as widely deployed as people thought. They used to really focus on the Aurora, and I think that's because it was in the budget. But I've always believed the black triangles were far more prevalent. And it's not necessarily a TR-3B. I think there's a different kind that has like aerospike engines. But sure, the guy told me that they were testing them there. I never heard from him again. He vanished, but it's always made me wonder. And when you're dealing with people who are flying SR-71s and U-2s, there's a lot of secrecy there. So I don't think you're necessarily going to have a lot of people coming out saying, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of black triangles over here. I don't think that's going to happen.
Hey,
plus, they'll get sent to a military prison.
Hey, bud, I want to change topics here quickly. because recently, the last few months, people have been filming the F-117 stealth fighter flying out of Tonopah Air Force Base in Nevada. This was an aircraft that was retired from the U.S. military 10 years ago. Have you checked up on this story as to why all of a sudden they are flying this aircraft?
No, I haven't heard that, but I'll definitely check it out. I mean, I could think of reasons why they would.
Tell me.
You know, it's a known airframe, so maybe they're testing something, using it as a test bed for something because they have a bunch of them that they already paid for. That's not that uncommon. They tried different kinds of paints because the paint actually turns out to be very important. They use a radar absorbent paint. So maybe they're testing with different types of paints to see if they can reduce the radar signature, the target signature. So I can think of reasons why they would use them. They might even use it as a drone. You can take, things like that and modify them. They used to do them with F-4s. They had all these F-4s left over after like Vietnam, and the F-4 was so widely used in the 60s that they started to use them as air targets. So they would retrofit the F-4 Phantom to be remote control, and they would fly it around, and then they'd use it for testing, the accuracy of missiles or shooting them down or whatever. But it's probably paint, maybe different weapons payloads. But it's very odd.
Tell me about this theory, because this would, if my memory reminds me, I remember hearing a story that F-117 pilots, when the aircraft was still quite top secret, they weren't allowed to fly it in the daytime. It was always nighttime flights. So in order to
moonless nights.
Yeah. So in order to keep the aircraft going, they modified other military craft that the public was used to seeing, but they modified the cockpits to be pretty much the same as the F-117. Had you heard this as well?
I had heard that, yeah. It wasn't a complete modification, but they'd put a lot of the same kind of instrumentation and stuff in there, for practicing.
Yeah. So do you think that maybe these pilots, because the F-117 was so advanced back in its day, that maybe they had a little bit of modification done to the cockpit, so they are now basically the same as what they would be flying at night?
It's possible. It's definitely possible. The other thing about it is that the shape of the cockpit might be the same as well. So the way you sit in it, especially if you're talking about a triangular aircraft, the F-117 is fairly triangular. So the way the cockpit is laid out, because the other thing, it's not just the plane itself. Keep that going. It's the pilots. The pilots, in order to keep their flight status, they need to have a certain number of hours, per month, per year that they have to fly. And that's true of all pilots. So if you want to keep your flight rating, you have to fly a certain number of logged hours per year. And so it would make sense that if you need them to keep flying, but the aircraft, you can only fly it on moonless nights once a week, or when the moon is low, twice a week, or whatever, that you'd have them fly other stuff in between. That definitely makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is happening. I think that's why it makes sense to take those aircraft, because the F-117, as it was known to be an extremely difficult aircraft to fly. It wasn't pilot friendly.
No, and neither is the B-2 bomber. Very difficult to fly.
Right. Right. So what do you think replaced the F-117?
From what I've seen, it's a triangular aircraft. It actually has two aerospike engines. I don't know. The aerospike is really for high altitude, so I don't know what they use to get up there. I've heard that they use scramjets and stuff to get it up to altitude before they engage the aerospike. But for an aerospike, you have to be really high. So, it's super fast, but super high. So I'm not really sure what they've got cooking, but I know there's a lot of sightings of this particular configuration of a triangular aircraft. In fact, there was a very interesting one where there was a whole chain of sightings of this one plane, and everybody thought it was different planes. One guy had seen it during the day out of an airliner, and then another.
I think his Skype cut out again. We'll see if Olaf comes back. Hope he does. We were getting somewhere. That click was kind of odd. Totally kind of odd. Olaf, are you there? Did you accidentally hit mute on your phone? Intriguing. Guess we should probably call him back. We're going to call Olaf back here. See if he picks up. Hopefully he does. We got you, buddy. We got you.
Okay. What part didn't you hear?
You were just talking about... oh, my goodness. Now I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden.
Well, I was saying that there was this one aircraft that was sighted multiple times in one day.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it flew past Tinker, which was a mid-air refueling site. They have a lot of, KC-10s and stuff that they use for mid-air refueling. And so then it goes over Cuba, heading toward Europe, and then it flies past another base that has a lot of mid-air refueling aircraft, and then it goes toward Russia. So there was a whole chain where this one plane was seen on this massive flight. It was crazy. But it was triangular aerospike engines, and you could actually see there was a couple of photos of it that were taken from the ground where it was very high altitude. You could actually see the heat warping. You know how the heat has when there's a massive amount of heat,
yes,
that it kind of warps the image. You could see the heat warping, and you could actually see that the aerospike engines extended along the back of the aircraft. It was very interesting that there was obviously two engines. It was pretty cool.
That is very, very cool. Very cool.
And as I said, that there has been a long history of black triangles being seen in the Central Valley and around Beale, and there's been rumors for decades that they were testing stuff out of Beale. That it's nothing new. And Beale is a very, very secure kind of place because, again, they were flying U-2s and SR-71s out of there. So, and flying SR-71s at the time is a good cover for flying other aircraft as well. Because most people, when they see something black fly over their head at night, even if there's a moon, they're going to think to themselves, oh, that's an SR-71, right? Because that's what they commonly would say.
Yes, but the problem is the SR-71's been retired since 1992.
I know they retired in '92, and they don't have a replacement. You're right.
Yeah,
I think it's a black triangle with aerospike engines.
Could very well be.
I mean, well, I'll put it to you this way: if an SR-71 could fly at 70,000 feet at Mach 3, this thing could fly at 90,000 feet at Mach 7. That's aerospike is a very different beast.
Yes, the hypersonic phase. Imagine if we had that in airliners.
Well, they were supposed to build one. There was actually a hypersonic airliner that NASA was testing. They have a huge chunk of the fuselage at a airplane museum on the peninsula south of San Francisco. I forget what it was called, but it was supposed to the original intent was to make it an airliner. And it was hypersonic. The Soviets actually experimented with a supersonic airliner as well. It's been tried.
Well, we'll see where it goes. Olaf, we got about 1 minute here left with you tonight before we got to bring in Everett Thiemer and the encounter, and you're going to stick around for that, which is kind of cool.
I am.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
And we've had no incidents with Carl tonight. Nothing.
No Carl tonight.
I know. I'm a little disappointed.
Well, I think the last time that I was on, I saw a UFO fly over my house.
That's
that
right.
That was good.
That was kind of cool. Maybe that was Carl saying hi to you that time.
I saw the same thing again last weekend.
Really?
Remember the thing I told you I saw when I was on the air?
Yeah.
I saw it again last weekend.
They're coming for you.
Same thing.
They're coming for you. Tell people where they can find Paranoia Magazine.
ParanoiaMagazine.com. You can also search for Paranoia Magazine on Amazon. At ParanoiaMagazine.com, we have some cool T-shirts. We have a new line of T-shirts that are CIA airlines like Evergreen and Southern Air Transport, Air America, a whole bunch. And then if you go to ParanoiaMagazine.com, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you subscribe to Instagram, you can see my various adventures where I go to weird places. I went to the Voice of America transmitter site out in Dixon. I went to a Navy transmitter site. I went by the mothball fleet looking for the Glomar Explorer. I go all over the place looking for weird stuff. So I take photos, put it on Instagram.
Awesome, my friend. You hold on. We're going to get Everett Themer in here right now with the encounter. We have officially entered the encounter on Spaced Out Radio tonight, where each and every night we finish off the show with our news. It could be weird, wacky, WTF, as some people say. But nonetheless, we bring it to you with our president of Team Stump and our intrepid news editor of the encounter, Everett Themer. Everett, good to have you with us, and Olav Phillips is still with us as well.
And it's great to be here with you guys. But as we talked last night, I think I need to step over into the operational management division of Team Stump. I found a couple of matching stumps.
Nice.
And I'm going to I'm going to put a little Team Stump logo on the bottom of them. And I found some stores in my town that are antique stores and they sell that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go in and present a marketing plan and see if I can get somebody to agree to carry a line of Team Stump end tables. And I might even video. I might even YouTube or video it just to see the reactions on their faces, because they're going to have to. They're going to think I'm an idiot.
Oh yeah,
I need some end tables.
$349.
One of our listeners sent us a photo of this furniture company selling a chunk of wood, probably 18 inches off the ground, for $349.
I believe it.
And the only thing that's been done to it is it's been stained. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, you're familiar with Deschamps, right?
No,
Deschamps was a French. Yeah, well, Deschamps was a French artist, and he wanted to introduce the question of what is really art, because a lot of people use like found objects and stuff. And so what he did is he took a urinal and he disconnected it from a Paris bathroom, and he put this urinal on display, and he signed it. And then he said because he signed it and his intent was to make it art, that now the urinal was art. And it's actually caused a raging debate in the art world to this day of whether it is actually art or not. But he took a urinal and signed his name on it.
Nice.
Isn't that just kind of like an autograph on an object, though?
But his intent was to make it art. And so because his intent was to make it art, it became art. That's why you can take a stump of wood and stain it and then charge $350 for it, because it's your intent to make that art or to make that furniture. It's about intent. That was his argument.
Weird.
I think we definitely have the intent to make furniture and sell it for as exorbitant of a price as we can.
I think you should go for it.
I've got a lot of stumps in my carport right now.
There you go.
And we could even charge more for the ones that have knots because we could call them naughty stumps. So we could sell them in the adult stores.
There you go. You got a whole plan.
Yeah.
You know
I got
what?
a plan here.
Olaf brings up a good point. You could autograph those stumps, and now not only are they furniture, they're pieces of art. I think the price just went up.
Well, actually, you know what I would do is not just autograph it, but get a brand made with the SOR logo, and then brand the side of it, and then stain it, or brand the side of it, sign it, and then stain it, and then you could charge even more.
Very good idea. That's marketing 101 right there, Everett. Marketing
We are
101.
going to be so rich.
We are going to be loaded.
You should make T-shirts. Make T-shirts with a picture of a stump on it and go Team Stump.
Oh, well, we're using Devil's Tower, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a weird place.
I know. Lots of aliens
It is
there.
a weird place.
Lots of aliens there.
Apparently.
Mr. Everett, tell us what's happening in the news.
Artificial intelligence is not going anywhere.
I know.
And you know that it's creeping more and more into our lives when reports and studies on how it can benefit employees begin to come out. Both ServiceNow and Accenture have released reports that are studying how AI can benefit. They're starting with, as is typical, one of the largest employers. They're starting with government. And one of the things that they have said is that AI has the potential to improve the employee experience by speeding up decision-making and automating mundane and repetitive tasks. Now, I don't know how much time, or if you guys have spent a lot of time in middle management or like data analytics or anything like that, but the entire job is repetitive and mundane tasks. So in some ways, I can see this sort of being the precursor to getting everybody to be okay with the idea of being replaced.
I think they are. And the fact that they are starting the justification program, that means it's coming soon.
Well, one of the studies, 91% of the executives that they talked to said their skilled employees spend too much time doing administrative tasks. And if they freed up those administrative tasks, the employees would have a better experience. They would be freed up to do what they do best, which is be creative.
Yeah, sure.
Well, if I could make a comment.
Please.
I noticed the same shift. I took one of my sons to McDonald's. He has a thing for McDonald's, and I'm not a big fan, but I took him into a McDonald's, and they had these touch screen ordering system. And so obviously I used it out of curiosity. And so I went home and I did some research, and apparently it's part of their phasing out people, and what they're going to do is completely automate it. So you walk in, you use these touch. They wanted to start with having people and the touch sensitive pad. So you fill out your order, and then the person makes the stuff and then gives it to you. But long term, they've decided that it's more efficient to just have the pad and then have the hamburgers robotically made. And their first step in doing that was to introduce the idea of not ordering it from a person.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know if you're familiar with the situation here in Chicago. Obviously, McDonald's is based outside of Chicago, and in the city, there are quite a few groups active on the idea that they want the fast food employees to make $15 an hour. So through different channels as it's been happening, I've heard different things, but these self-service kiosks for ordering were essentially a response to that, because there's several stores here that have some of them, and they've reduced the number of cashiers that they have. They're not all entirely self-service, but instead of having 4 or 5 cashiers, now oftentimes you go into one of these ones with the kiosks, and they might have 1 or 2 cashiers that are basically just handing out the orders.
Well, Amazon has said that by the end of next year, they're going to have 60 stores.
The Amazon Go store?
Yeah, the Amazon Go store where there's no people at all.
Yeah.
It's all RFID tags and yeah, there's no people at all. You just walk in, buy your stuff, walk out.
And that's part of artificial intelligence.
Well, and they track all the purchases. I heard a funny story. You were talking about big data and data analytics. There was a guy who actually, I think he tried to sue Target because he got a letter in the mail one day, and it was filled from Target, and it was filled with all these discount coupons and stuff for having a baby. And they said, congratulations on having your baby, right? And he said, wait a minute. I'm like 50-something years old. My wife's 50-something years old. She's not pregnant. What's the deal? And so he called up Target, and he was very irate. And he said, what are you doing? Why are you sending me this? This is BS. Don't send me this. And they said, well, we analyzed your purchasing habits, and they're consistent with somebody who's pregnant. And he said, well, I'm not pregnant. My wife's not pregnant. Whatever. You got this wrong. And they said, well, is there somebody else who lives in the house that uses your Target Red Card? And he said, well, yeah, my daughter. And so he's like, oh. So he goes to the daughter and says, hey, what's the deal? Because I forget how old she was, early 20s or something. And she said, yeah, I'm pregnant. And so they had actually figured, she just hadn't told him yet. And so they actually figured out from the buying habits that somebody in the household was pregnant. And that's all through data analytics.
I remember that story, and that's a little bit creepy how they can put these different pieces together and analyze things and know you better than, or in this case, know your family better than you do.
Oh yeah. They have data warehouses with petabytes of data, purchase data. That's why you should always be very leery when you use those cards, because they trade you a discount for data, basically.
Yeah, it's all.
And if you walk in there and pay cash, they don't know.
Yeah, it's all to track exactly, to form a profile of what you are and what you buy, so other products can be targeted towards you.
All right, Everett, let's move on to story number 2.
It's another thing that won't go away.
Mm-hmm.
There is
Hold on, let me guess, because you and I do not talk about this. I'm going to say for the second night in a row, we probably have something to do with sex bots.
You are correct. And I'm starting to think I might have a problem searching out these stories, because I don't know, somebody must be tracking my internet searches, because I keep coming up with sex bot stories.
Weird.
But the mayor of Houston has said that these sex bot brothels are not the sort of business that Houston wants. And he said this in response to a plan by Uvi Gravel. It's a Canadian guy, of course. So he owns a Canadian company called Kinky's Dolls, and he wants to open up what he calls a warehouse where these dolls can be displayed for purchase. You can try them out. You can rent a room. Essentially, it's a way to not call it a brothel, but it is. And the mayor of Houston has said that he doesn't want to be the moral police, but he wants to scour the codes of Houston to ensure the health and safety of the residents, because he doesn't want he doesn't want these, and he's not the only one. There is an outcry from some of the citizens. He feels these are inappropriate for the town. And I think that opens up a big question of, can it be labeled prostitution or anything, or what should it be labeled if it's a machine?
I still think it can, because they are going to a place of debauchery and sin.
Yeah, but
there's happen.
Okay, but couldn't you argue though that a gentleman's club is a place of debauchery and sin?
Sure, but you're not touching.
But it's a machine.
I understand that. Olaf, what do you think?
I think it has to do with fluids. That if fluids are exchanged, that's what ultimately, you're renting the device for sex, which is, to me, what makes it a brothel. I'm not going to, say whether it's right or wrong, but I think the argument for it being a brothel really comes down to, that you're renting the device for sex, and you're having a sex act with it, which is what would make it a brothel.
So do you think that the next step becomes legislating sex acts with machines?
I don't see a difference.
The regulation of it, probably.
Yeah. I'm not seeing a difference.
Remember, in the United States, at least, we've never been shy about regulating morality. I mean, we did try to outlaw alcohol, and, in California, we've had cities that outlaw, soda, carbonated drinks. And
right.
So, we definitely, at times, try to legislate morality. Or actually, more than morality, we try to legislate behavior, which I don't think is necessarily a good idea.
Vivian brings up a good point in the chat room here, guys. She goes, there's a big problem starting up right now in regards to child life like sex dolls. So pedophiles can do their disgusting thing without attacking a real child. I think some of these dolls, and I'm paraphrasing here, will only cause more fantasies. That's a good possibility.
And it is a good point. Maybe then the manufacturers need to be regulated in a way that requires them to make the dolls look at least a certain age or something like that.
I'll tell you the only reason why I like this idea, okay, is if it has the ability to get some very, very sad people off the streets, especially young children, 16, 17 years old, ran away from home, and this is how they're making a living on the streets. Mm-hmm. If it allows them to get some help because there is no demand, I would be all for it.
It definitely would impact human trafficking.
But just to play devil's advocate here, and going back to last night's story where we talked about the brothel and the brothel workers that were against these, there are some people out there that are kind of making the point that this could potentially increase trafficking because you become interested in this, and then, I don't want to say it would be a gateway act, but you become interested in this, and then you search out the real thing.
But that's about supply and demand, right? Because it's obviously whatever you're going to do with a machine is going to have a much lower price point than doing it with a human. So it would actually force the person to pay a lot more to find a human in a human brothel versus a machine. You'd have to pay more of a premium. So you'd probably end up making more money in the long term, I would imagine.
Weird. Everett, we got time for one more.
Acapulco, Mexico, their entire police force has been suspended and removed because of corruption.
A corrupt police force in Mexico.
Yeah. Surprising, isn't it? But the state of Guerrero has basically come in and suspended and removed the entire police force because they believe that it has been infiltrated with criminal actors. And obviously this is in response to the drug trade. And I don't know if you remember back in the 70s and 80s, but Acapulco was kind of one of the hot tourist destinations. And
Yes.
now it has one of the highest murder rates in the world.
It was always on the Love Boat. They were always going to Acapulco.
Or Puerto Vallarta.
Or Puerto Vallarta. Yeah.
But
you know, there was a town in Mexico. I forget the name of it, but they actually they rose up and took out the gang that was running the town, and they disarmed them and they kicked them out. And then the second thing they did is they kicked out the police force, and they decided to have their own like citizen militia.
Ooh, I don't know if I like
the
that.
police force was corrupt. Yeah, the crime dropped, I guess.
You know what
Just
scares
remember,
me?
it was interesting.
What I guess this kind of, I don't know if it scares me or fascinates me, but last year in Mexico, there were between 64 and almost 100,000 kidnappings last year. Now, most of them obviously were not famous people. They didn't make big headlines, but just the idea of almost 100,000 kidnappings alone, and they're guessing or basing this idea on it's primarily related to the drug trade.
Well, you know what? Here's another angle of that. A lot of these police officers are probably trying to save their lives and their families' lives.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay, so if this is a way, you know, like if one of these cartels basically said, if you don't support us, I'm going to murder your children right in front of you and your wife, because that's the way they are, beheading people all over the place. It's disgusting. Who's to say that a lot of these so-called corrupt police officers are just caught between a rock and a hard place and don't know what to do?
Yeah, but, you know, when you're a sworn police officer, you're supposed to know what to do. And
you know that, and I know that, but let's face it, the gangs haven't been too friendly to them.
You know, maybe at some point, Olav is right with what he said about the town uprising. Maybe something like that will happen, but there is a serious problem there, and it's beginning to impact both the tourism, and there is an oil company that is possibly going to pull out of a planned development not that far over the border because of their fears of gang and drug violence.
Let's get to the thought of the day, shall we? Since we won't have the news tomorrow night because we got the Paranormal Roundtable, thought of the Dave is as follows. What gives a... Actually, that's not the question. That's yesterday's. What the hell is yesterday's pulled up for? Now I gotta find this. I feel so unprepared. Used almost. Today's thought of the day is, why do you believe or not that there was a secret Apollo mission to the moon? Got some interesting answers here, Mr. Olaf. Let's read some of them off. Kat says, it's space. We only know a sliver of what they do, and despite popular belief, if we take what we have been shown as the only progress, well, that would just plain suck. I mean, sure, the moon has resources, both natural and impacted asteroids, and above everything else, it's all about money. James states, NASA actually stands for Never a Straight Answer.
Yep.
David says, I grew up around Cape Canaveral during the 60s and 70s, knew many engineers and even some of the astronauts who worked on Apollo. It is absolutely impossible for there to have been any secret launch of the Apollo Saturn V rocket stack. Thousands of people are involved, and they talked extensively and excessively about everything going on at work. Now, having said that, it is conceivable to have launched an Apollo Command Service Module and Lunar Module into Earth orbit using classified Titan 3 or 4 launches, and then have them rendezvous and dock with a fueled upper stage, also placed in orbit on a classified Titan launch. Therefore, execute a covert lunar mission.
From Vandenberg.
Interesting.
Not from Cape Canaveral, from Vandenberg.
John states the Mona Lisa footage was an interesting story, but it's just that, a story. No hard proof, etc. Fact is, we'll never know for sure. Right. Susan states, no. But did anybody notice that every time we get close to leaving Earth, our ships blow up? I have just been wondering this. Michelle, the only secret thing about the Apollo missions was that they observed something that perhaps they didn't expect to see there, and they were ordered not to say anything. I believe that.
For sure.
Yeah, I do too.
Let's go to Chuck. While I have an open mind to it, how and where would they hide the launch of an Apollo? I know they have places all over the world that could handle it, but getting a whole Saturn V rocket there would be a whole world of problems alone before even thinking about a launch. Ad Gnome. How else could they discover the moon is actually made of gnome cheese? Really? Gnome cheese. Sherry gets the last word. She states, I think it is our government that they are well aware of portals, and Andrew Bashago has spoken about it. Therefore, there would be really no reason to have used a rocket to get there when there are probably portals in every big city. Same with Mars. Intriguing. Everett, my friend, tell us where they can find the encounter.
People can find the encounter at spacedoutradio.com under the news tab, or they can find us at Facebook at facebook.com/SOR The Encounter Online.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Olav Phillips, thanks for being on the show tonight.
Anytime, anywhere.
All right, my friend. Tomorrow night on the program, we got the SOR Paranormal Roundtable. Happens the final Friday of every month, and it's the start of Paracon weekend up here. I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty stoked. So if you're heading this way, drive safe. You're in for one hell of a weekend. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everybody on the Revolution Radio chat room, everyone on Spreaker, in the Veterans Club, the SOR Space Travelers on Facebook, and on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. Thanks for telling your friends, your family, even your pet dogs and cats to listen to us each and every night. That makes us bigger and better. Because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a great night, guys and girls. The weekend begins in 24 hours. Let's have some fun. See you tomorrow. Good night.